How would you read this? Among commonly used verb-dependent words, quite a few also attach to the rentai ke. Besides shika, there are also these. Today, I'll guide you through the pitch accent of rentai ke when attached with these dependent words. Let's get started. Hey guys, welcome to Monochrome Japanese, a peaceful space where you can focus on your Japanese study. I'm your host, Shiho. Following the introduction episode, this is the fourth video on pitch accent of verbs. If you haven't watched the introduction yet, I strongly recommend doing so before moving on. Also, the previous 3 episodes on the mizenke, renyoke, and shushike will also be helpful for today's study, so please check them out as well. I previously categorized verb-dependent words into 5 types based on how they interact with conjugated forms of verbs in terms of pitch accent. And in previous videos, each of them has appeared at least once. Just like the previous episode on the shushike, today's rentai ke will also involve these 2 types. Let's look at them one by one. First, the follower type, which should be very familiar to you already. Except for commonly used dependent words that attach to the mizenke, which do not involve this type, all the other 3 conjugation forms up to now, including today's rentai ke, are frequently followed by these type of dependent words. If you don't remember, you can review the previous episodes on the renyoke and the shushike, or even go back to the episode on noun-dependent words. The commonly used follower-type dependent words that attach to the rentai ke include these. If you read them, you'll notice that dake and hodo have no pitch accent nucleus within their 2 mores, while the other ones all have their nucleus on the first more. Made, yori, kurai, bakari, yoda. For these 2 nucleus-less ones, it's very simple. Since they are the follower type, they simply follow the pitch where the preceding verb ends. For example, iu is a nucleus-less verb that ends on a high pitch. So both mores of these 2 dependent words are pronounced high. Iu dake, iu hodo. Au is a nucleus-bearing verb that ends on a low pitch. So both mores of these 2 are pronounced low. Au dake, au hodo. For these nucleus-bearing dependent words, since their initial pitch must also follow where the preceding verb ends, when they attach to nucleus-less verbs which end on high pitch, the pitch drop within the dependent word itself would be more noticeable. Using iu as an example, iu made, iu yori, iu kurai, itta bakari, iu yoda. When they attach to nucleus-bearing verbs, which end on a low pitch, because there are 2 pitch drops happening, the drop within the dependent word itself becomes less noticeable. I have briefly explained this in the previous episode on the shushike, so you can review that if necessary. Using au as an example, au made, au yori, au kurai, atta bakari, au yoda. Alright, these are the commonly used follower-type dependent words that attach to the rentai ke of verbs. In my short series, I've already introduced the pitch accent of dake, hodo, made, yori, bakari, so refer to them if needed. Some of these short videos only have examples where they attach to nouns, but as the follower type dependent words, the pitch accent behavior stays the same. Next, let's look at the loner type. In the previous episode on the shushike, we learned several commonly used dependent words of this type. As for the rentaike, precisely speaking, there are only these two. First, shika. Since the loner type dependent words are always pronounced low, when they attach to nucleus-bearing verbs, which end on a low pitch, they don't sound very lonely. Therefore, what we really need to get used to and practice is when they attach to nucleus-less verbs, which end on high pitch. We can still use the verb iu as an example. Iu shika nai. So, the sentence at the beginning of this video should be read as 雨だけど約束したから行くしかない。行くしかない。One thing to also notice here is that it can also attach to nouns. But in that case, it is read as shika, which becomes a nucleus-bearing follower type dependent word. I have explained this in my short series with some examples already, so feel free to check that out as well. Next, let's look at the so-called nominalizing particle no. As listed at the beginning of this video, the commonly used dependent words that attach to the rentaike of verbs include these. That's right. The no in noda, node, and noni is actually this nominalizing particle. As the name suggests, it nominalizes the preceding element. In terms of pitch accent, you may have noticed that when referring to these three dependent words, they are more than often pronounced high-low. However, as the loner type dependent words attaching to the rentaike, both moras of each are pronounced low in actual sentences. Just like shika, we will again use only nucleus-less verbs which end on high pitch as examples. そんなことを言うのは失礼です。彼はよく失礼なことを言うので、やだ。それは音節と言うんだ。それを彼女に言うのに勇気がいるよ。Also, I've covered this nominalizing particle no in my short series as well, so refer to that too if needed. Alright, now we have covered all the commonly used dependent words that attach to the rentaike of verbs, as well as their pitch accents. They are the follower type, だけ、ほど、まで、より、くらい、ばかり、ようだ, and the loner type, しか、の、のだ、ので、のに. You may recall that the shushike from the last episode also involves these two types. Although shushike and rentaike differ in meaning, but in modern Japanese, they are identical in form. In other words, when they're followed by various dependent words, the pitch behaves exactly the same. Therefore, combining what we've covered in these two episodes should greatly help. Finally, I'd like to announce that this series on pitch accent of verbs concludes with this episode. Yes, I know. We haven't talked about the kateike and the meireike yet. So let me explain. In modern Japanese, the only dependent word that attaches to the kateike is the conjunctive particle ba. So I encourage you to find out which of these 5 types it belongs to. I will also make a short video about the pitch accent of ba later, so stay tuned. As for the meireike, it does not take any dependent words except sentence-ending particles expressing certain moods or tones. So I don't think it's that meaningful to include it in this series. But regarding the pitch accent of 가테케 and 메레케 and other conjugated forms of verbs, I have already explained them in detail in the introduction episode. So please refer to that if you haven't already. Alright, that's all for today. If you found this helpful, please subscribe to my channel and share my contents with friends who are learning Japanese. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.